Merry Christmas, everybody, from Janine. I wanted to give you a little gift today, and that is an answer to some of your questions about what supports you should ask for your child when they're at school. And I want to be really clear that I'm going to give a big list of supports, and you don't necessarily want to be asking for all of them. It's really important to think about your child's specific strengths and weaknesses and work with the team so that they can get the right amount of support. We don't want to give them too much so that they're not actually building all the skills that they need to build, but we don't want to give them too little so that it's too hard to build those skills. So finding a balance is key, and fighting for every single one of these is not necessarily in your child's best interest. But let's jump right in and take a look at different things that you can be asking for. So I'm going to share my screen with you here, and we'll dive in together. So here we go. We've got, first of all, accommodations, and accommodations are strategies that help the student access the curriculum by adjusting how they learn without changing the learning expectations. So in other words, they're still learning the same thing as the other children. We're just finding a way for that to be easier for them, more realistic for the child with DLD. So what can we do differently? Well, the first one, pretty simple, preferential seating. So if the teacher is going to help them focus, we want to ask for them to be seated close to the teacher, or we want to ask for them to be seated away from distractions. That's a pretty self-explanatory one. Checking for understanding is another great strategy that we can use. So sometimes we want to ask the child, what did you understand, or what are we supposed to do here, to check if they understand. Maybe we want to have them just repeat it back or say it in their own words. Another really big one here is multimodal instructions. So oftentimes our kids with DLD might struggle with working memory. And so if we provide the instructions orally, we say them aloud, and we also have them written down, and we also have them broken down into clear, concrete steps, that can help our child. Then, if there are parts of the instruction that they don't understand, it's easier for them to recognize I didn't understand it because they can read it again and again, or they can have somebody reading it aloud to them, checking for comprehension. Then they can figure out how to move forward if they need to find a definition for a word or something like that, and refer back to it so that if they've completed the first part, they know, okay, I can check here to see what it is that I need to do for the third part of the instruction and so forth. So it's really important to have the instructions written in a clear way with clear steps, and to ensure that they are provided with both listening instructions, hearing it aloud, and having access to it written down. And maybe in another video we'll talk about too how we can help our child make sure that they've checked off each step as they go, going back and check, am I sure that I've followed each of the parts, etc. Repeating and rephrasing is important. So especially if there's complex information, especially if there's a lot of new vocabulary words, or if there's more complex grammar, it's really important for teachers to say these things more than once. We know from research that a lot of our kids with DLD need to hear a new word about 36 times before they can learn it. And so repeating information is really, really important, and also saying it in a different way if the child isn't grasping it that first way that it's said, that can be really important too. Visual aids are very important for many of our kids with DLD. So when the teacher is teaching and presenting a new concept, but they've also got pictures or diagrams or charts or maps, that can really support the child's comprehension and really reinforce those key concepts. And we want to be using visuals not only when the child is listening to a teacher lesson, we also want to use them to support the child when they then have to express themselves. Maybe they're giving an oral presentation, maybe they need to do a writing assignment, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but visuals are very important for many of our kids. Frequent comprehension checks are important, so we've talked about this a little bit before. Reviewing the key ideas and concepts with the child, checking in to make sure that they're on track. That can be very important. Self-advocacy is huge. We want to teach the child to recognize what strategies work for them and then empower them and help them feel comfortable that they can go right ahead and ask for what they need because we want them to be able to learn in the way that they learn best with the supports that are most helpful to them. And some examples there would be breaking tasks into steps, using graphic organizers, seeking clarification, and so on. Easy referencing. So sometimes our kids with DLD struggle with different thinking skills, higher order thinking skills. You might have heard the term executive function skills. And organization is an example of those higher order thinking or executive function skills. And if kids are trying to answer a question and there's this paper here and that paper there, very often our kids can't find everything that they need. But if we have the text and the questions on the same page, or you just need to even flip it over, makes it a little bit easier, but ideally on the same page so that they can see all the information that they need, that can be really helpful. Flexible response options is a great one too. So let's let our kids show what they know in a different modality if that is more helpful to them. So sometimes our kids can draw really detailed maps, or maybe they could describe the information that they know by talking instead of writing. There are different ways that a child can show what they know. And so it's important for teachers to be flexible and to accept different types of responses. Extra time is a huge one, very self-explanatory. That could be extra time on tests, extra time for assignments, and so on. Graphic organizers, we talked about those a little bit, and I'm wondering, I might jump into that right now. And I wanted to show you a resource that we created. It's actually here on Teachers Pay Teachers, the top 10 words every student needs for success. So this one is great because it has 10 different kinds of graphic organizers. So we've got this one on comparing. Most of us have seen a Venn diagram before. So if a child is asked to compare giraffes and zebras, that can feel overwhelming. But when we have this sort, okay, is the information about giraffes, this is the information about zebras, and this is something that is true of both of them, it's very clear because you can see it. It's right there. And so that can make it a lot easier for our kids. And then when it's time to write the paragraph and come up with the different words that they need to make a sentence, there's less of a cognitive demand, right? Because they have the information written down, and so they don't have to be trying to remember it all and think of all the different things that they need to include. Let's say they're writing a paragraph. They don't need to think of all the things in the paragraph. They just need to figure out how to put it into sentences. And with this particular resource, we've also thought about kids with DLD and been really intentional because I've worked with so many kids with DLD, and maybe they're thrown here's some graphic organizers, but they're still stuck because the kids with DLD that I've worked with, then they just repeat these facts, but they don't know how to link them together or put them into sentences. So in this resource, we've also listed out useful words or phrases that they can use. So when you're making a sentence and using the information from the graphic organizer, you can use words like similar, both, alike, in common, different, but however, on the other hand. And so then there's an example here. And in this resource, we also then have blank graphic organizers so the child can practice. So I'm going to just show you a few other options. Um, this is a different kind of graphic organizer if the child is asked to make predictions. And this is an example of a completed one, and then how the child then used the information from their graphic organizer, put it into a paragraph, and used the useful words or phrases to link the ideas and use more complex sentence structure, because we all know many of our kids with DLD do struggle with complex sentence structure and all the grammar stuff there. So a few other ones just to show you. Here we've got a flowchart graphic organizer about the water cycle, just so you can have some other ideas in mind. This is a summary graphic organizer. So summarizing is a skill that is very challenging for a lot of our kids with DLD, but if we teach them, okay, when we're summarizing, we want to list out the main idea, have three supporting details, and then list the conclusion, saying the main idea in another way, then that can make that much easier for our kids. Here we've got a sequencing graphic organizer, and we have a few options for that one. We've got a timeline. Here's another one. So this is what graphic organizers are. They can look really different. This one is for making inferences, so you can see just how it can be so clear for our kids when they have all that important information here. This is when you're contrasting things. You can use a T-chart, graphic organizer. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them here. Categorization chart. So that's what we're talking about when we're mentioning using graphic organizers. And this one can feel confusing for a lot of parents because some of us haven't heard of the term graphic organizer, but teachers or therapists are mentioning it, or we're only familiar with maybe one or two types of graphic organizers, but there are many, many different options out there. So that's another good one. We've also got assistive technology. So word prediction can help a lot, text to speech or speech to text, spelling and punctuation checkers for written work, that can help. So maybe they're going to answer their questions for the test using an iPad or a laptop. That can help a lot of our kids. Background noise reduction, I don't need to explain that. Model expected responses. So, especially in a large group setting, I often like to ask a peer who is a little bit stronger in that area to answer a question first, show the type of answer that we're looking for, and then ask a similar question to our child with DLD. So they've just activated some of that knowledge and are clearer on what the expectations are, because sometimes when we ask a question, we can use a lot of big words and it can be confusing for our kids. So having kind of an exemplar there can be really helpful. Wait time is important. Our kids often just need more time, and wait time can feel super hard for speech therapists, for parents, both of those things, and for teachers too, right? Sometimes I actually have to force myself to count to 10. And you'd be shocked before you even get to 10 how much more information comes out than if we hadn't waited, because we often jump in after 1 or 2 seconds, right? So wait time is really important. Our kids sometimes need to process and find the words that they need, and that takes time. So wait time is a big one. Peer support, that's pretty self-explanatory. Pre-teaching and reinforcing vocabulary is really important as well. Sometimes teachers can share the vocabulary words in advance with parents or with speech therapists or with tutors to support that development. Visual schedules are quite important too. Sometimes we need to modify what the student is expected to learn. So this is not changing how they learn, like an accommodation. This is changing what we expect them to learn. To better align with their abilities and needs. So we might modify tests or assignments that are, especially those that are really language heavy. And we can get really language heavy tests in not only English language arts, but also science. Math has word questions that can be really hard. History, many, many different subjects, when you actually look into it and think about it, are so language heavy. So we might want to simplify the language, simplify the tasks. Maybe we only ask them to answer half the questions. That can be a way that we change that, adjusting the expectations. What I was actually saying here, fewer examples or simplified concepts, but focusing on those essential skills. Alternative assignments. So instead of having to write a 5-page essay, maybe the child makes a poster and does a presentation. Language scaffolding. So with our kids with DLD, we might want to give them sentence starters and word banks or structured templates that are not available to some of the other students. So that's changing what they're expected to learn there. Simplified reading materials and ongoing reading support. Those are pretty self-explanatory too. So I don't want this video to go on forever. These are some areas that you can think about to get you started. If you have more questions, join us on our Developmental Language Disorder Community Facebook group, and we can discuss these further. And thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. Bye.